Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a corporate collapse so huge it literally left ships, cargo, and entire industries completely stranded. This is the wild story of Hanjin shipping.
I mean, can you imagine that? A company that's a cornerstone of global trade with a fleet of ships bigger than some navies just gone. Like poof. That's exactly what happened with Hanjin, and we're about to unpack how that single bankruptcy sent massive shockwaves all across the globe.
So, to really get a handle on the chaos that followed, you first have to understand the sheer scale we're talking about with Hanjin shipping. This wasn't just some company quietly going out of business. This was a true titan of the seas taking a nosedive. The speed of this whole thing was just staggering. It wasn't a slow, drawn-out decline. Nope. The final act played out in a matter of days. On August 25th, its creditors basically said, no more money. 6 days later, on the 31st, the company files for court receivership, which is kind of a last-ditch effort to survive. And then, the very next day, September 1st, its ships become outcasts on the open sea. Just a few months after that, it was officially all over.
The immediate fallout wasn't something you just see on a stock ticker. No, this was happening in real time, out on the water, and it created a crisis like nobody had ever seen before. This was way more than a logistical headache. It was a full-blown siege at sea. Ports around the world slammed their doors shut, completely terrified they wouldn't get paid for docking fees. So you have all these Hanjin ships packed with billions of dollars worth of stuff for companies like Samsung and Nike just floating. They couldn't go anywhere. The global supply chain didn't just bend, it snapped. And this was all happening right before the holiday shopping season, the worst possible time.
Now, with its own economy hanging in the balance, an economy that relies heavily on exports, everyone, and I mean everyone, expected the South Korean government to swoop in with a massive bailout. But they had a very different and you could say a much more ruthless plan up their sleeve.
So, the government didn't just say no. It laid out this really clear three-step ultimatum. Hanjin had to fix its finances, it had to convince ship owners to lower its expensive lease payments, and it needed to lock in its spot in a big global shipping alliance. Now, Hanjin actually managed that last one, but it totally failed on the two big financial points. For the government, that was it. They saw it as a failure to save itself, so they just walked away.
So, instead of throwing good money after bad and trying to save the sinking ship that was Hanjin, South Korea did something else entirely. They created a brand new organization, the Korea Ocean Business Corporation, or KOBOC. And its job wasn't to save the past, but to build a new, much stronger future from the wreckage.
And the government's strategy becomes crystal clear when you see what they did next. They let Hanjin fail, and then they appointed this new state-backed corporation, KOBC, to help out Hanjin's biggest rival, Hyundai Merchant Marine, or HMM. The plan was simple, really. Let HMM cherry-pick Hanjin's best assets and basically anoint it as South Korea's new national champion on the high seas. It was an incredible move, turning a complete disaster into a huge strategic win for their industrial policy.
And get this, the plan was even bigger than just the shipping lines. The government also pumped a jaw-dropping 4.2 trillion won, that's over $3 billion into its shipbuilding industry. They used the crisis not just to build up a new shipping giant, but also to save their critical domestic shipbuilders, who were right on the brink of collapse themselves.
Okay, so South Korea's decisive, you might even say brutal move, did not go unnoticed. Not at all. The shockwaves rippled right across the region, and other big maritime nations immediately started putting up their own defenses. As this quote makes pretty clear, all of South Korea's rivals saw it stumble. I mean, the collapse left a massive hole, slowing down traffic at huge ports like Busan and hammering the shipbuilding industry. And for other countries, this was two things at once: a huge warning of what could happen to them, and a golden opportunity to grab a bigger piece of the pie.
Over in Taiwan, the reaction was immediate. They saw what happened to Hanjin and they did not wait around. The government moved fast, setting up this huge loan fund worth 60 billion new Taiwan dollars, that's almost $2 billion US, to act as a financial firewall for its own shipping giants like Yangming and Evergreen.
And it wasn't just about cutting checks either. Taiwan went all in. They provided the loans, sure, but their maritime bureau also jumped in to manage shipping prices to protect their own exporters from all the chaos. They even handled the really messy stuff, like coordinating who would take over Hanjin's local operations and helping the staff who are now out of a job.
So after all that, what can we learn from this massive corporate shipwreck? Looking back, the collapse of Hanjin offers some really powerful and, frankly, timeless lessons for businesses and governments everywhere.
4 huge lessons really stand out here. First off, bad leadership and terrible debt management can sink even the biggest ship in the fleet. Second, this is a big one. Countries will absolutely step up to protect their own strategic industries when things get tough. Third, having a smart, integrated plan, like how South Korea linked shipping and shipbuilding, can turn a crisis into an opportunity. And finally, and maybe most importantly, it showed us all just how fragile our global supply chains really are.
So here's the bottom line. The issues that sank Hanjin, massive corporate debt, intense global competition, and the strategic importance of shipping, those things haven't gone anywhere. The Hanjin story is a permanent warning sign, and it leaves us with a really critical question. Who's next, and how do we stop this from ever happening again?